Welcome to a pivotal moment in our global story. The 2025 BRICS Summit in Rio de Janeiro marked a turning point for Africa, signaling a shift in global power. BRICS began in 2009 with Brazil, Russia, India, and China, later joined by South Africa, bringing Africa into the fold. Now, with Egypt and Ethiopia joining, Africa's voice within BRICS is stronger and more diverse than ever. This expansion means nearly half the world's population and 40% of the global economy are represented. For Africa, it's not just about a seat at the table, it's about shaping the agenda, advocating for development, and forging new partnerships. The expanded BRICS offers African nations more choices, greater agency, and collective bargaining power for a fairer global system. The Rio Summit wasn't just a meeting, it was the dawn of a new era for Africa. With Egypt and Ethiopia joining, BRICS now has 3 African nations in its core, each with distinct geopolitical and economic importance. Egypt brings its control of the Suez Canal, a critical artery of global trade. Ethiopia, home to the African Union's headquarters, symbolizes continental diplomacy and resilience. South Africa, a founding BRICS member, continues to serve as a bridge between Africa and emerging powers. This expanded African presence allows the continent to speak with a stronger, more unified voice on the world stage. It also creates an internal bloc within BRICS that can prioritize African concerns like infrastructure, food security, and debt relief. The symbolism matters too. Africa is no longer waiting for a seat at global institutions, it's now helping reshape them. The growing BRICS family gives Africa room to explore alternatives to Western financial dependency, to boost intracontinental trade, and to deepen South-South cooperation, especially with Latin America and Asia. In essence, BRICS is no longer just a geopolitical group, it's evolving into a counterbalance to Western hegemony. For Africa, this is a strategic opportunity to reposition itself at the center of global transformation.
Let's explore BRICS Nation, formed to counter G7 with emerging economies. It started with 4 countries, Brazil, Russia, India, and China, called BRIC. Later, South Africa joined, turning it into BRICS. In 2024, 5 new members joined: Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates. They formed the new development bank. BRICS represents 30% of global GDP, 40% of the global population, and they're planning to have a BRICS currency.
The Rio Summit's agreements were bold, demanding reform of global institutions like the UN, IMF, and World Bank. BRICS leaders called for a system where developing nations, especially from Africa, have a real voice in global decisions. Climate and green energy were central, with BRICS pushing for a just transition that supports growth and poverty reduction in the global South. African leaders linked this agenda to initiatives like the Great Green Wall and a continent-wide African carbon market. The summit also launched an AI governance charter, aiming for ethical, inclusive technology development. For Africa, this means harnessing AI for progress in health, agriculture, and education, while ensuring digital sovereignty. These declarations are more than words, they're a blueprint for a balanced, inclusive world where Africa is central. The groundwork is set for a new kind of global governance. The demands for reform of the UN Security Council include adding permanent seats for African nations, a call that's grown louder and more urgent. As the only continent without a permanent voice in the most powerful global forum, Africa's exclusion undermines the very legitimacy of international governance. BRICS leaders echoed this call in Rio, emphasizing that no global reform can be complete without African representation. In climate negotiations, African nations pushed for recognition of the climate debt owed by industrialized nations. They urged that climate funds should not come with unfair conditions or add to Africa's debt burden. Moreover, the BRICS AI Charter launched at the summit emphasized not only ethical development but also local capacity building. Africa needs digital infrastructure, trained engineers, and protected data sovereignty, not just foreign apps and algorithms. And while the West talks about regulating AI, BRICS is prioritizing access, affordability, and autonomy, 3 things Africa desperately needs as the 4th industrial revolution unfolds. The Rio Summit's focus on inclusive governance wasn't theoretical, it laid out practical, actionable steps that can empower the global South, and Africa, most of all. The Rio Summit's most groundbreaking discussions focused on financial independence from Western dominance. BRICS is building alternatives to the US dollar, including BRICS Pay, enabling trade in local currencies and reducing reliance on Western systems. Africa's Pan-African Payment and Settlement System, PAPS, is already transforming intra-African trade, saving billions and boosting economic integration. The synergy between BRICS Pay and PAPS signals a shift toward a multipolar financial system. BRICS is also exploring a new digital or basket currency, echoing Africa's push for a mineral-backed unit to fund green projects. For resource-rich Africa, linking currency to tangible assets could unlock wealth and fund development on its own terms. While the dollar still dominates, the move toward de-dollarization is accelerating. These efforts aren't about destroying the old system but building a resilient, multipolar one. For Africa, it means unprecedented control over its economic destiny. BRICS Pay and PAPS represent more than just technological shifts. They symbolize the rewriting of financial history. For decades, African economies have been trapped in cycles of debt, currency devaluation, and aid dependency, often dictated by IMF and World Bank conditions. By settling trade in local currencies, African countries can finally escape the double cost of converting into dollars, which drains millions annually. It's also a form of economic liberation, trading with partners on equal terms, without intermediaries or external dictates. The idea of a BRICS-backed reserve currency tied to commodities like gold, lithium, or rare earth minerals also mirrors Africa's vision. African leaders have long discussed a gold or resource-backed Pan-African currency, something that could finally make the continent's vast resources work for its own people. The 2025 summit hinted at joint development banks and lending institutions among BRICS plus nations, reducing dependence on Western credit ratings and high-interest loans. For African startups, infrastructure, and green projects, this could unlock long-term capital with fairer terms. This economic awakening is not just about surviving globalization, it's about redefining it. With BRICS, Africa can finally reimagine its economy on African terms. At the 2025 BRICS summit, Africa's leaders were proactive, pushing for permanent Security Council representation and equitable climate finance. Yet challenges remain: internal BRICS divisions, absent leaders, and the risk of diluted focus with expansion. Navigating these dynamics is crucial for lasting impact. Still, the momentum is clear. Africa is now a global actor, not a bystander. Initiatives like PAPS and the African Continental Free Trade Area are already driving independence and prosperity. BRICS amplifies these efforts, offering a global stage and powerful allies. This is Africa's moment to move from dependency to partnership, shaping its own destiny and a more balanced world. The journey has just begun, but the future is bright and full of promise. But no transformation comes without trials. The expanded BRICS family, while powerful, now faces the challenge of aligning very different national interests. There's always a risk that Africa's agenda could be sidelined if internal politics or global pressures rise. Still, African countries are more united than ever around shared goals: infrastructure, value-added industries, energy access, and digital sovereignty. From West Africa to the Horn, from Cairo to Cape Town, African voices at BRICS are calling for not just reform, but reinvention. This year's summit also saw strong civil society engagement. African youth representatives, women entrepreneurs, and tech innovators brought their visions forward, proving that diplomacy is no longer just for governments, but for entire societies. And as BRICS expands, there's growing talk of creating BRICS universities, media networks, and even cultural exchanges, initiatives that could amplify African narratives and knowledge beyond economics. In short, while the road ahead is complex, Africa is not walking it alone. With BRICS, it's walking with allies, ideas, and most importantly, power.